The significance of Fleet Week, just walk me through it. I mean, it's such a big week here.
You know, it is. And it's about the connectivity between our sailors, our Marines, and Americans across all this great country, and particularly those here in New York City itself. New York City has been welcoming our sailors and our Marines for over 35 years, and that's truly extraordinary. And so many New Yorkers have actually served in our Navy and our Marine Corps. So it's also our way of saying thank you. Thank you to all the veterans who've served in this great city, out in Long Island, the tri-state area. It really is extraordinary.
Yeah, and it raises awareness about the service as well. Recruitment, I mean, do you see a direct impact when you do events like this on those recruitment levels?
Well, unquestionably so. I mean, the interaction between sailors and Marines and the families of New York City, getting to understand what our Navy and Marine Corps is actually all about, how they serve our national security interests around the globe, so that we can be successful here, so that our economy can thrive and grow. That's the connectivity between the mission that our sailors and Marines serve in every single day and how it contributes to the economic security of this city, the financial capital of the world, right? And the financial success of our entire economy across the United States.
Yeah, I just stepping back more broadly in terms of recruitment efforts and goals for 2023. Are you on track to meet your expectations?
It's all hands on deck. And I will say that as long as I've been secretary and as long as I've been wearing the uniform of the Navy, you know, I served for 22 years and served in 17 years in the private sector, very connected to our Navy and our Department of Defense. Anytime our nation's economy actually has been strong, and it is strong today, we have high inflation. That presents a unique challenge, obviously, but unemployment is very, very low. It makes it sometimes tough to find the people to recruit into our Navy and Marine Corps. And that's why it's incumbent on us and all Americans to remember the role, the mission that our sailors and Navies play, and to consider joining our Navy and Marine Corps.
I've just got one more question on this before we move on, and that is Top Gun Maverick, highest grossing movie of the year last year. When the first Top Gun came out, it actually led to a bump.
It did.
In enlistment. Have you seen something similar?
We're seeing similar things. It's hard to gauge, obviously, and the metrics are hard to exactly follow in terms of the exact connectedness between someone who sees the movie and decides to join the Navy and fly as a Navy pilot on board an aircraft carrier like the Essex, or the USS Ford, which today is in Oslo, Norway, right? I mean, look, thank God our nation is coming out of COVID, right? Today, Americans can understand that if they want to join the Navy and Marine Corps, they're going to see the world, right? They're going to have experiences like I had. You know, I grew up just blocks away from here on 42nd Street between 11th and 12th Avenue. My parents walked me up and down the docks of the Hudson River. And I have no doubt that psychologically, that's why I was drawn to the maritime. This is a wonderful country made that much more wonderful by our Navy and Marine Corps. I have no doubt that over the next few days, plenty of New Yorkers are going to have that same experience. And Brennan, you may not know this, but I have a special surprise for you as well, too. As you know, as Secretary of the Navy, I have the responsibility of naming ships across the entire United States Navy. And I'm very proud to announce here as well, too, on the deck of this great ship, the USS Wasp, that in honor of all the many hundreds of thousands of Americans that have served from Long Island, Queens, Brooklyn, and further out into Long Island, all the way out to Montauk, I'm naming our latest submarine, a Virginia-class submarine, SSN 809, which is going to be named the USS Long Island. So, and that's an appreciation to all those Long Islanders who served in our Navy and Marine Corps. And of course, I expect more of them to sign up into our Navy and Marine Corps now that I've named the submarine after them.
Yeah, well, that is great news for New Yorkers. I want to shift to geopolitics.
Yes.
I want to start with the Middle East. The fact that recently we saw Iran seize not one but two oil tankers. These are commercial vessels, including one that was chartered by an American company, Chevron. Shines a light on the role of the U.S. Navy in patrolling the world's waterways. Your thoughts on what's happened and what it's meant in terms of a response to prevent more of these seizures?
Well, that's exactly right. And from the very beginning of our founding, the mission of the Navy actually has been to keep open the lines of communications globally so that free trade can occur all across the globe. As you well know, 90% of the goods that are traded all over the world actually are traded on the oceans. And actually 1 trillion worth of transactions, financial transactions, take place every day, over 600 cables that are actually on the bottom of the seabed. It's the Navy's responsibility to keep those lines open. The behavior of Iran in this case is intolerable. It really is. We expect everyone, every country, to behave in accordance with the international norms of behavior and allowing free trade, all right, across sea lanes that are not territorial waters of Iran. They're free and independent lanes for all nations to trade on. We cannot allow that to continue. And so we are increasing our presence in the Mediterranean to provide additional patrols to try to prevent this from happening.
Have you seen any more attempts?
There haven't been attempts here in the last few days since the last one occurred, but we're watching very, very closely now with all of our assets in the Mediterranean.
All right, let's talk a little bit about China as well. Just yesterday,
Yes.
Microsoft, CISA, the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, basically disclosing that a Chinese state-sponsored group has hacked critical American infrastructure, including Guam. Was the Navy affected?
The Navy has been impacted by attacks, cybersecurity attacks. It has been for a long time, and we monitor them very closely. And I can't go into the specifics of what we do to try to counter those attacks and to protect ourselves from those attacks themselves. But it's no surprise that China has been behaving in this manner, not just for the last couple of years, but for decades. And that's also is intolerable. We shouldn't be allowing to do that, right? They're stealing our financial assets. We're here again in New York City, the nation's financial capital, and they're stealing our corporate assets, IP basically that belongs to companies, commercial and national security companies. We cannot allow this to happen, and we won't allow it to happen. And so although I can't go into the specific things that we do, let me assure you and the American people that we watch this very closely. And what we should do, however, is we should shine a big spotlight every time they actually do this so that there is clear distinction about who is actually doing this, that it is illegal, and that we should not tolerate. And you could also argue about their illegal fishing as well too throughout the globe. In Central and South America and the Pacific, everywhere their fishing fleets are, they conduct illegal fishing, which is a similar theft of IP, you might say. These are the resources that many poor countries, for example, rely on for their economic existence. Again, we should not allow that to happen, and we need to shine a spotlight on it every time that we can.
We're seeing it in the investment community and the business community take root, this increasing risk and how to game that out in terms of the possibility of China at some point absorbing Taiwan. How acute is the risk of an invasion or even just a blockade?
Well, I can't say specifically the risk of the invasion, obviously, will have a negative impact on the entire, not just the economy of the United States, but the world economy. And also have a very negative impact, in my mind, on the Chinese economy as well, too, because their economy relies on free trade around the world. And so the dynamic will change. And that's one of the biggest lessons, I believe, for China. The actions that they take could very well lead to the detriment of their own economy, right? And sustainment of the finances of their own people as they try to bring their own people out of poverty, right? So the risks here are very, very great. But I don't think that it's inevitable. I think the relationship has to be managed very carefully, very smartly, diplomatically, from a national security perspective, and from an economic perspective as well, too. So this is a whole of government effort that President Biden is committed to ensuring that we can maintain a peaceful relationship with China while at the same time making it clear to China, right, that the risks are great and they shouldn't take those risks. That today is not the day to go invade Taiwan because the risk to them will be even greater than it is to the rest of the world.
So you don't think that we've seen a timeline accelerate then for China to make a move on Taiwan?
I don't think the timeline has accelerated. I'd like to think that it's our job in the Department of Defense and the Department of the Navy to actually keep shifting that timeline to the right so that President Xi wakes up every single day and say, this is going to be a lot tougher than what I think it is. Take a look at what Putin's doing in Ukraine, for example. He thought it would be a piece of cakewalk, basically, to take Ukraine. And thanks to the resilience of the Ukrainian people and the support of the American people for Ukraine, look how difficult it has been for him to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. I think those same lessons learned are being heard loud and clear in China as well.
Yeah, China now at least reportedly has the largest navy, at least by amount or number of ships in the world. How does it speak to military modernization efforts here and how the U.S. Navy is countering those efforts?
And I'm concerned about the growth of the Chinese Navy. There's no question about that. They've been investing in their Navy and their merchant Navy as well, too, and their Coast Guard and their fishing fleets since 1979, you could argue, okay? We are modernizing our Navy, however, at a rate that has not been seen in decades as well, too. President Biden, the Secretary of Defense, have provided resources as part of the Navy. We currently have over 70 ships that are actually under contract. We have 55 ships that are currently under construction. These are the most modern, lethal capabilities that our nation has seen in a long, long time. We're also strengthening our nuclear triad, building our Columbia-class submarines. Our newest destroyers are the most advanced and lethal submarines. Don't compare to their Navy doesn't compare to the capabilities that we're bringing to the table. And I'm just talking about the ones that I can talk to, not the ones that I can't even talk to. So yes, we have the most modern, lethal, capable Navy in the world. And the last thing I'll say on that note, it's because of our people, because of the sailors and the Marines that are walking the streets of New York City today. It's because of the strength of their character. I like to say that we train our sailors and Marines to think strategically, to think about their mission and what they have to accomplish. When you think about what China does, they don't train their people to think strategically. They script their people to fight is all they do, right? And they don't necessarily have the trust in their government that our sailors and Marines have in our government, in our way of life, and democracy and people. And inevitably, it's the core values of our nation, of this democracy, the United States of America, that will prevail in any engagement with any adversary anywhere in the world.
Let's talk a little bit about some of those new capabilities.
You can tell I'm a little bit passionate about that.
I can tell you're passionate,
Absolutely.
and I'm glad to hear it. As an American, I'm excited to hear it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of those new capabilities. Something that's very much in focus in the tech world right now, for example, is artificial intelligence.
Yes.
How are you thinking about those emerging technologies from a Navy standpoint, especially when you have things like autonomous ships and unmanned underwater vehicles?
Transformational. Transformational. It is the way of the future. It's the investments that we need to make. It's the investments that the private sector needs to make, working with us, for example. The application of AI, of machine learning. And the Department of the Navy alone, today we have over 1,000 projects that are being funded just on AI alone. Across the entire spectrum, across the entire enterprise, on the business side, on the warfighting capability side, and that's the way of the future. It really is. And so when you take a look at the work that we've been doing on Task Force 59 in the Middle East over the course of the last several years, we are now actually transporting those concepts of operations, okay? AI mesh network with drones in the air, on the surface, and the subsurface, all working together with manned ships as well too. We are now transferring that concept of operations to operations in the Fourth Fleet, in the Caribbean, to help with the counter-drug mission coming in from the south into our southern border, to also help shine that spotlight that I talked about on China with regards to illegal fishing. And it provides an opportunity not just for us, but us working together with all our partners. We have ships here from the United Kingdom, from Canada. We have ships from Italy, for example. For us to all be able to work together, in the case of the Fourth Fleet, with our partners in Central and South America, to build into this mesh network, right? So that we're all sharing information intelligently with each other. So then we can actually apply the limited man resources we have to go find that drug runner that might be running drugs into Colombia or Panama or any other nation, for example, or our own nation from the southern border. So it's very, very exciting. It's the way of the future. It's what we've got to do. When you take a look at the USS Essex and you think about the USS Ford in Oslo, Norway today, standing watch in the Baltic, right? And you think about the MQ-25 capability that is an unmanned drone that will be able to actually refuel our F-18 fighters, the type that Maverick flew, right? That's the way of the future. So it's very exciting as Secretary of the Navy to know that we're making these dramatic advances in a way that China is not making as well too.
And of course, as we have this whole conversation, there's a lot of focus on the debt drama that's playing out in DC right now, and a spending deal does seem to be what those negotiations are going to hinge on. As we have this entire conversation, if you were to see budget caps or even a cut to defense spending, what would it do to this?
I think the results will, quite frankly, be detrimental. So everything that I've just spent half an hour talking to you about will pretty much come to a grinding halt. We will not be able to invest in those new technologies that are necessary for us to be able to defend against China, against Russia, and other capabilities in the future. But more significantly, the financial impact to these sailors and to these Marines who rely on a reliable paycheck. You know, I served 17 years in private sector. I built and ran a small business. In those 17 years, I never missed a payroll. It would be unforgivable if the Congress actually allowed us to miss a payroll. And it's not the commitment, the contract that we have made with our service members who serve so valiantly, right, and so selflessly in service to their nation.
Are you making contingency plans in the possibility that we could actually see a default?
We always make contingency plans in the Department of the Navy. We never leave anything to chance. Of course we are, but we recognize the difficulty of even thinking about executing those plans, which would be very, very unfortunately. And I hope And I know that the president is trying very, very hard to come to a closure with the Congress. But it is a responsibility of Congress to essentially increase that debt limit so that we can go on with the business of doing everything that this country needs to do over the course of the next several years.